Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. Real Estate Coaching Radio is the nation's #1 daily radio show for realtors who demand authentic, real-time coaching. Get ready for fluff-free, unfiltered, full-strength honesty about what's truly working to get you into action, helping others, and making money now in today's real estate market. Now to our hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Hey, we're back. Welcome to your July 22nd. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and thank you for continuing to make this the #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate professionals, at least in the United States. I was looking at our analytics yesterday, and it always surprises me, and I mean this, it absolutely 100% shocks me. I shouldn't even say surprise. When I see all the places in the world where we're getting people listening to us and downloading us, thank you. Thank you for listening to Julie and I. Hopefully we're having a positive impact on your lives. Julie, welcome to today's show.
Yes, thank you. I've had lots and lots of coaching calls, plus our premier coaching class together with all of those great members. So lots of movement and stories and reporting. I think that one of the prevalent stories right now is that we're starting to see more cut appraisals. Mm-hmm. Lately, I've seen anywhere from 5 to over 25,000 in appraisal deficiency. Luckily for our coaching members, they know what to do about it. They know how to fight a low appraisal. They know how to negotiate that. And so far, at least amongst our coaching clients, it has not caused the deals to die. So I'm proud of them for that.
I had a funny coaching day too. My various coaching clients, one sells hundreds of homes that are right around 200,000, and I had 3 other calls where they're selling stuff that's mostly super high end. And so today I heard stories about Tom Cruise shopping for properties, actually shopping for agents to list properties.
That's awesome.
I also heard another funny story about...
Hey, wait a minute, I have a license.
He's in California.
I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and then the other one that stands out is a story about. I'll tell you guys the story because you'll appreciate it. So it's off the coast of Greenwich, a huge mega yacht, more than 200 feet long, which is just an enormous thing. It's like 5 stories or something ridiculous, is moored. And evidently the guy who owns this yacht is a very, very wealthy billionaire type from China. And so my coaching client in Greenwich gets a call from the guy's handler. And the guy's handler, called Rob and said, listen, so-and-so would like to go look at this particular property. And we're moored off the coast right now in a big-ass yacht off the coast of Greenwich, Connecticut. So you're talking about a yacht that probably is hundreds of millions of dollars, just to put this in perspective.
So technically, this isn't a drive-by call. This is like a float-by call.
Well, exactly. You're spoiling my fun here.
Sorry.
And so they wanted to actually boat to the property they wanted to see was waterfront, and back to the water, and had a deep water dock. And so my coaching client was worried that because the size of this yacht, the water wouldn't be deep enough. And the guy said, well, don't worry. We'll just take the dinghy, to which my coaching client then asked, well, how big is the dinghy? And it turns out the dinghy by itself is like 50 feet long. And this was the boat, this was the big boat's little boat. And 50 feet on a boat is enormous.
It's big.
Yeah. And so the guy comes and looks at the property. Evidently he's a really classy gentleman, and everything went well. But he decided the house was too small for him at 16,000 square feet, right? It was 16,000 square feet was too small. But so I'm always sharing that story with you guys because on a normal coaching day, Julie and I coach every morning, private coaching clients, and to go from just someone who's selling hundreds of houses for 200,000 to a story like that sounds like something out of a James Bond,
so
is crazy. And, I should add some color to that last story. Mm-hmm. Why is the yacht moored off the coast of the United States? It's because the guy that owns the yacht is living in fear of the coronavirus, and he has self-quarantined himself on his yacht along with his family off the coast of the East Coast. And his opinion was that coronavirus was something engineered in the whole thing. And just like I said, a normal day.
It does sound like a movie, though. It sounds like a movie.
Exactly, I know, but it's just so bizarre. I mean, when you're just you experience it every day.
Absolutely.
You go from helping somebody solve a simple problem with a buyer to all of a sudden you're in the midst of having conversations about something that's going to, basically be hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate.
Crazy.
But what's really shocking is how all the conversations are the same,
they're
right?
similar, yes.
They're exactly the same. I mean, if you're talking about somebody wanting to move up and, they have a house to sell and the mechanics of making all that work, they're not just so dissimilar than dealing with some
you're
mega...
trying to solve somebody's problem.
Right, but the skill set necessary to solve the problem is not, they're all basically the same sets of skills, which I always think when I'm having these coaching calls, like when I'm having the coaching call with somebody who at some point decided that they had to sell hundreds of houses worth $200,000 and, that was what they're going to do versus, say, choosing a more expensive market, maybe in a different state or part of the country, that where the average would be $1 million. I just often wonder if the person doing all that work to sell all those hundreds of houses every year, with the average commission of being $6,000, nothing wrong with that, not criticizing. Yeah. I wonder if they really recognize the fact that they could probably, with their skill set, move to a really expensive market someplace else and have to sell maybe 50 houses and make more net profit.
Well, and in fact, they're vastly more experienced than most of the agents that they then would be competing with. And I think that you're right. Most of our listeners don't appreciate that.
Yeah, they don't.
They live in fear of it. We talked about that on our talk about things you're not allowed to say to yourself, where we're saying, oh, that's out of my league. That's too much for me. I can't handle that. That's not in my wheelhouse. Well, there's only one way to overcome that is to investigate it, to preview those things, to familiarize yourself with what your options actually are. And if you decide that you're going to stick with cranking out, the normal bread and butter stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. But at least look at what your options are, because it is the same skill set. And, why not do fewer of it if you could? Right?
Well, we did the same thing in our career.
Sure.
We were selling, between 100 and 200 houses at the average sale price of $225.
Yep.
And frankly, you and I got bored of it. And so we decided to move across town to this area called New Albany Country Club, where the average sale price was close to $900,000.
Yeah.
And exactly what Julie said is exactly what we experienced, because we were so used to hustling all the time and working hard, working nights and weekends, knowing all kinds of different things to do in order to get a property sold from, just all the skill set that we developed selling so many houses. When we applied that to more expensive price ranges, not only was it directly applicable, but the other thing that I guess I underestimated was how much those sellers appreciated our hustle. And when we would get business away from some of these, we call them country club agents, who were just sort of felt they were entitled to the business because maybe their kids went to the same boarding school.
Because they golf together. Or
exactly.
Whatever.
And so they had all these assumptive, approaches to the real estate market, these country club agents. And when Julie and I went in there, and the sellers started catching wind to the fact that they had options other than the ones they felt sort of, pressured to use, agents and at the local country club agents. As soon as Julie and I rolled in there, it didn't take us long before we were the number one listing agents in that marketplace. I remember we rolled into the spring with the most active listings one year, and everyone was taken by surprise. Well, I'll tell you exactly how we did it. It's the same way we did it when we were selling meat and potatoes houses on the other end of town, is that we started prospecting aggressively in the fourth quarter, really the late stages of the third quarter, which is what we're in now, guys. And we started hammering, outbound proactive lead generation, and we were calling into that market looking for expireds and just doing any old expireds, new expireds.
What do we call builders?
Yep, we called builders. We got a lot of lists. The builders were actually some of the easiest business to get because the local real estate company had sold them the lot, pressured them into listing the spec with them, and none of the builders liked being manhandled like that. And because the listing agents didn't have to compete or really work to get the listing in the first place, they took the business for granted. And one builder would send us a referral to another or to another. We ended up working with 3 or 4 builders exclusively. And again, it all came back down to the fact that we were hustling. We were working hard. We were working nights and weekends. We were working like all of you normally do. Yeah. But what I'm suggesting to you, and just keep an open mind to this, is that you can go up market if you chose to. There is probably an up market in your market that wouldn't even require that you move. Or you maybe want to consider moving to a different part of the country. Eventually, that's what Julie and I did. And that's what a lot of our coaching clients do. You don't have to, once you have a skill set that's basically predicated on proactive lead generation, that skill set you can essentially unplug from where you are and plug back into wherever you want to be. Once you know how to actually, proactively lead generate, pick up the phone and do the other things we teach you in our coaching program, those skills are portable. What a lot of you guys do instead is you invest so much money in your local center of influence and past clients list, which is not a bad move. I'm not suggesting you don't do that. But and then you basically build off buying leads, and so you can't leave. You've invested so much money in that particular market. You don't have any real portable skills because you can't. So for example, if I were to take one of our top coaching clients and I were to pluck them out of whatever market they're in and I were to drop them in a totally different market, all they would have is some basic startup capital and access to the MLS and an active real estate license in whatever state it was. I guarantee you some of our top clients could rebuild their businesses within 90 days.
Yeah, some of them have.
Yeah, because they'd focus on going after listings.
That's right.
So I was on a coaching call today with Brandon Jackson, North Carolina. And Brandon and I role play occasionally. We did today. And he's got his scripts down. But where he knows he's vulnerable is he's not that aggressive with holding himself accountable to actually doing thorough pre-qualification, and he's not that aggressive as he should be with his lead follow-up. And those are two easy, simple things to fix. But these are the skills thing. This is what coaching is all about. And when you're entering into a market like this, and I'll give you for example. So I was talking with Brandon about, he went on 5 listing appointments, he set 5 listing appointments last week. He went on 2 and he took both those listings. That's a good week, right? But no, listeners, that's a normal week for one of Julie and I's one of our coaching clients. That's that's the expectation, 3 to 5 listings.
Well, that's the accountability. That wasn't a new thought. That was what he's supposed to do week in and week out.
But remember what I said. He said he set 5, but he only took 2. And so I asked him about the ones that or the calls that he'd set. He hadn't gone on the appointments yet. And I asked him all the pre-qual questions about the appointments he set. Well, I quickly discovered that he wasn't asking all the pre-qual questions. So he was going on these listing appointments ill-prepared. Whereas had he asked all the pre-qual questions, which is included as part of the coaching program, he is using the pre-listing pack, which solves a lot of the problems. But he would be taking, and he probably will, because I think I set his sale straight, he will take 5 out of 5 of those listings. Guys, listen, competing for listings and competing for business is something mentally and emotionally that a lot of you struggle with. You've got to really be careful with that because this is a very competitive business. You're competing for everything. There is one, in life, there is one loser, there is one winner. When it comes to listing a house, someone got the listing, other people didn't get the listing. Don't believe that your only competitor is yourself. Don't believe and fall for some of that mindset, Mickey Mouse. You have to suffer the pain, the indignity of losing when you lose, because then you're going to learn from and you're going to self-discover why you lost. Or at least if you're going to be introspective enough, you're going to self-discover why you lost and maybe ask the seller why they choose somebody over you. So any takeaways from your coaching calls today?
Sometimes it's just as valuable to find out why you won.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we teach in coaching is to, here's how we always looked at it was if you're going to have time invested in generating the lead in the first place, pre-qualifying it, following up, sending a pre-listing package, using the pre-listing package scripts, and doing a CMA and showing up, you'd better take the listing, right? You've got all of that pre-ramp up, especially if you're following the 7-step system that we teach, that we coach, you better take it. So it's interesting. I always have our coaching clients ask, when they've been competing, I'm curious why you decided to choose me or to choose us versus the other agents that you spoke to. And they usually have the same, textbook coaching answers that we teach. So you can pre-program the outcome, but sometimes it's something as simple as, you're the only one who actually listened to what my needs were. You're the only one who actually cared about my situation versus rolling in here being super assumptive, thinking you know all about me, and that's a pretty typical thing. So that was my thought is it's good to know when you lose because you can correct it. It's also good to know why you won so you can continue doing it and do it more often. And I think it's a good confidence booster too.
And listen to what Julie just said. You have to ask why you lost and you have to ask why you won. And sometimes, for example, like you guys will make the mistake of thinking that your postcards and your, social this and the other thing is the reason that you had the shot at the listing appointment. And that's never the case. And I'll give you guys an example. So Julie and I, when we sold real estate, we had a lovely little gal that worked for us. Her name was Kelly. What was Kelly's last name?
I don't remember now.
I don't remember either.
I just remember she looked like Meg Ryan. She
did look like Meg Ryan. Yeah. Anyway, so I remember we're in our office and I was listening to, we were getting a listing call. And this is a seller that called in, wanted to interview Julie and I for the job of listing their home. And Kelly she knew to grab a form, a piece of paper that basically was a script where she'd ask all these questions. And she was going through and asking all the questions, and I was listening in, maybe looking over her shoulder. And then she got to the question about why did you list with Tim, or why are you calling Tim and Julie out for the job of selling your home? And there was basically different boxes that she could check, or there was a fill-in. And the person said like postcards or something. And then she wasn't really paying attention. She asked the same question again, like almost immediately after the guy had said postcards, or gal had said postcards or whatever. She then marked the box postcards, but then again she asked the same question, why are you calling Tim and Julie out? And then they said they were a referral from my neighbor down the way who they sold the house for a few years ago. That basically had we just gotten that form, and had she not accidentally asked the lead source question twice, we would have gotten the form and said, well, hell, look at our postcards. They got us a listing lead. But it wasn't the postcards. It was actually the referral from the trusted friend or advisor down the street from them. And we then edited that script, which is a script you guys have now, as part of the coaching program. So we asked that question twice, and we ask it in a slightly different way the second time, in a slightly different place in the script. The point being is we want to know why we actually got that lead and why you guys got the lead. And what you're going to quickly discover, it's almost never because of your marketing. Though they might tell you it was because of your marketing, it's almost never because of the marketing of the social networking or whatever. It's almost always because it's either because you did proactive lead generation, or it's from a result of someone who you had helped in the past, probably a lead generated from proactive lead generation that was sending you more business. That's the way this business really works. It's not that mystical or difficult to understand or comprehend. Just keep your head drilled down on the fact that at the end of the day, this is a people helping business. And when you help people solve their problems, you eventually will have no problems, especially financial problems of your own. The more people you help, the fewer problems you're going to have. But the formula for success is really that simple. It's not more complicated than that. Anything else before we get to a couple headlines and talk about our last point?
Yeah, well, that's basically it. So, sometimes agents will ask on the Premier Coaching Call how much communication is too much, and they convince themselves that, doing their lead follow-up and talking to their past clients. And even I had this last week about talking to active listings. You cannot over-communicate, guys. I know that you convince yourself that you're stalking them, but no, you can't over-communicate. People need that, especially now. So, if you want your business to keep giving back to you, like Tim just described, where you help one person, they refer the next person, and it starts to snowball, you have to make sure that you are asking for that. One of the things I have our coaching clients do on their recent transactions is call somebody that closed last week. You can basically check on them. Are your utilities working? Is everything set up for you? And then you ask them, who else do you know who could use my help buying or selling real estate?
Every survey I've ever read, and different, it used to just be NAR that did this, but now everyone does it, and they poll people that recently closed on a transaction, buyer or seller. And, the questions are always about the service provided by your real estate agent. And when you get to the complaint section, right, where what did you dislike? The answer is always lack of communication.
Yep.
I've never seen one of those surveys completed where the feedback, if there was negative feedback, wasn't, my agent. Communication. So there it is. You guys should listen.
And what do agents think? They think you're going to say commission or price or
exactly.
Negotiate it.
It's not.
Something.
It's always a lack of communication. So if you want to win, just over communicate. And if you're over communicating to the extent that you're bothering them, well, guess what they're going to tell you. And when you're communicating with your clients, your buyers and your sellers and everyone, your centers of influence and past clients, your own personal slogan should be, and you guys can have this, is at the end of every conversation, oh, by the way, who do you know who's thinking about buying or selling that I should be helping in this market? If you ask the question that way, and you have to proactively ask it, if you ask it just like that, nobody's going to be offended, and you're not going to have any issue whatsoever asking the question, because you're emphasizing the words, whom should I be helping? And when you say it like that, your ego all of a sudden doesn't have it's not on its haunches ready to, feel like it might get rejected. So be very conscientious of, the fact that if you are putting yourself in a position to help people, if you're urgently, and Julie and I call it furiously fast lead follow-up, in this type of market, in any type of market, those two qualities are going to make it so you win, even if you're in the process of mastering your skill set. All right, so we're going to share with you a couple of headlines, and then Julie and I are going to finish up the series we started last week, which it ended up being like 21 things you should never say to yourself. All right, I'll read the headline, and then Julie, can you just summarize so you don't have to read the whole thing? All right, so this is a funny article because I chose this one to share with you guys because it just goes to prove how bifurcated not only is the news reporting on real estate, but really the understanding of what's happening for the real estate markets. And I think it's fascinating to see how different like DS News or Inman or even some of the mainstream economic channels like Bloomberg maybe or CNBC and it's interesting how they're trying to spin some of this information. And honestly, I can't quite decipher what their motivations are. But this article is a perfect example. So the headline was National Delinquency Rate Improves for the First Time Since January. That sounds great, Julie.
Yes, and it says for the first time in 5 months, the national delinquency rate improved, falling to 7.6%. That's still pretty big. In June, as the number of past due mortgages fell by 98,000, according to Black Knight. This comes after the delinquency rose from 3.2% in January to 7.8% in May. What's considered a serious delinquency, somebody who's 90 days or more past due, those rose. So we're like back and forth on what's falling and what's rising. Serious delinquencies rose by more than 1.2 million. Okay, so this previous sentence said that it fell by 98,000.
Well, but get to the punchline. Get to the last paragraph. That's where it gets really interesting. It's not that long.
Okay, so let's see. Nationally, 13% of borrowers said they missed payment versus 11% in April. 9% of borrowers, for example, in Orange County and LA, defer as, Orange County. Am I reading about Orange County?
Yeah, just
6% of borrowers in LA and Orange counties in April were late 30 days or more, according to CoreLogic. This is a stark contrast from 2.3% rate last year. So 6% is more than 2.3%, even though the headline says that it dropped.
So on
right?
our main website, timandjulieharris.com, we are doing our best to not have any of the news and information we're sharing with you guys have any sort of hidden agenda. We're just giving you the facts and the statistics, even though sometimes they're going to conflict with each other. But when you read stuff like this, you've really got to think about what you're reading. In most cases, most people are just going to read the headline, and maybe they're going to read a couple bullets from it, but they're not going to read past that. So it's fascinating to me. I think here's my theory, if you want to know the truth. I think there's actually an organized effort right now that's coming out from banks in particular, but also maybe even the FHFA to try to cover up what's actually happening in housing. And I'm not sure it's being done for political reasons, I think it's actually being done for fear reasons, because if the housing market starts to unravel like it did back in 2008, I'm not really sure there's going to be any sort of easy resolution to it. So in between the government doing all sorts of forbearances, and I'm sure that the forbearance type activity is going to really heat up, it is, but you're going to see also a real controlling of the negative news about housing. Now here, sounds like I'm a conspiracy theorist, right? Remember, guys, it was back in, I think, March or April that the government actually asked the states to stop reporting new unemployment claims. Well, I'm going to take you guys back to 2008, 2009. The government actually asked the states to stop filing notice of defaults. And so why was that important? And I'll give you an example, because there was actually an interesting article. This was, over 10 years ago, but the study was fantastic. They took, I forget who wrote it, but the gist of it was properties in California in the same market that were in default, and this reporter had evidently tracked which houses had the notice of defaults filed on them the quickest and which ones went to foreclosure the quickest. And so what they determined were the banks were actually holding off filing the notice of defaults on the properties that had no equity or were underwater. And if the house had any, resemblance of equity in the property, they would file on those the quickest. Because then through the foreclosure process, obviously, they could actually make some money opposed to just losing money. But then what happened, and this is, I think, obviously is going to happen again. Not only are the unemployment claims from the states being the government's going to try to control that information flow, but you just watched. You already saw a mortgage forbearance. You saw something which I never would have guessed, a rental eviction forbearance. Somehow legally it's legal for the government to somehow tell the judges in the states and the courthouses in the states not to allow any evictions to go forward on private property that's owned by individual investors that have private contracts with their tenants, that somehow it's okay for the government to somehow step in.
Yeah,
and
which, by the way, they have mortgages on and now will
Right.
potentially be delinquent because they're not allowed to evict a tenant and replace them.
So just the very fact that those types,
Crazy.
right or wrong, again, not passing judgment, but the very fact that those things actually happen tells me that this go around, when there is an unraveling, it's going to be something that is going to happen prices falling, even though it's already happening in a more meaningful way in markets like certainly California, New York, Miami. You're going to start seeing it happen in Seattle, Minneapolis. I doubt if you're going to see a whole rush of notice of defaults for all the reasons I just stated. And I certainly doubt if you're going to see a big rush to REO. And so the emphasis will be put on forbearances to start, extend and delay, basically delay and stay is what we called it. And then you're going to see the next phase, which is going to be some kind of graceful exit out of the house, where it's going to be some form of deed in lieu of foreclosure and short sales. And then the people beyond that will be headed off towards the foreclosure.
And there could be
That's
something
what's going to
new,
happen.
Invented like COVID forgiveness of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there could be.
It doesn't have to go just like last time, but I think to your point with the inevitable unraveling, they're at least going to try and manage it at a different level than what happened before. They've got different tools they're already using. And I do, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that when all this is over and we look back in time, I think you're going to see things like between this period and this period, that's COVID forgiveness, and we'll automatically extend you 6 months, and we're going to try and drag it out long enough to get a vaccine, get you back on your feet, get you reemployed, and then maybe we'll take not just that forbearance chunk of money that's owed, but also this extra 90 days because of COVID, and you get to keep your house, or something like that.
There's going to be hybrid versions of all this stuff.
Think so.
The new economic stimulus, though they're not calling it that, of course.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be coming out, like this week or next week. I think we told you, on Sunday we told you guys one of the most interesting, and I dare I say, I don't know, it's humorous to me, carve-outs that they have proposed in the stimulus is supposedly giving every family, are you guys listening? Listeners, are you listening? You're going to love this part. Giving every family in the United States an $4,000 per adult. So, obviously a couple, they're going to have an $8,000 tax credit, and if they have any children, each kid gets a $500 tax credit
for travel,
for vacation. It's going to be some sort of vacation. I don't even know what the name of it's going to be, but is that not just the most hilarious thing? And the criteria to get the tax credit is pretty ridiculous. You just have to travel 50 miles from your home.
Yeah.
That's it. And it covers airfare, it covers hotels, food, the whole thing. So those of you who have been, scratching at the walls, ready to go on a vacation,
now you're going to be paid too.
Hang tight, because you might be literally paid. No, it's a tax credit.
It's a credit.
It's not money in the bank, which means you'll owe if you owe $8,000, or it'll be taken off your tax bill. But I mean, that's just outrageous. So for you to think that there's going to just be some sort of procedural, predictable rollout of the foreclosure process again, I think that is no way that's going to happen. But we are going to be watching it. We are monitoring it, and as we've been telling you guys, the early warning signs that we look for every single day, as far as BPO orders and as far as some of these other things, cut appraisals and all that, we are going to continuously tell you guys about what we're seeing, as we have been. And right now, our predictions, we're not altering them. Well, I shouldn't assume Julie hasn't altered hers, but I'll ask her. So are you still expecting this time next year for us to be in a decidedly different market?
I think so. I think this is probably the start of it. I think that, as is quoted in some of these articles, the trajectory of the housing market probably is pretty tightly connected with the trajectory of COVID and how long we're stuck in this, what do they call it in Stranger Things? The upside down, basically.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. But we do see, we're tracking cut appraisals, higher levels of inventory, deals that tank because of unemployment and furloughs and reasons like that. And then price stagnation, which there's an article I sent you this morning that a lot of the major cities in the world, the only outlier is Sydney, Australia, for some reason, probably because they didn't have that much COVID. But, they're already, sales are off by like 60 and 70% in some of these markets.
Well, some of our biggest selling clients, they were in Manhattan, they said there's the luxury over like $2 million or something.
Yep.
The market's off by 70% or something.
Yeah.
So, it's happening.
Well, and you can't have, if it was only in Manhattan, maybe it could be isolated because they are kind of their own deal there. But the fact that now we're seeing it in multiple cities, and they were talking about Houston, and these
Yeah.
are not just like your typical bellwether, like you'd expect it in Vegas. You would expect it maybe in Phoenix, and areas that last go around were really smacked by it. But now when you see normal towns like Houston, doesn't have a particular reason to be hit by that.
Well, they
I mean,
Houston
they have
has
the
its
oil
own,
deal.
exactly.
But
have
they
their own set of
mentioned
issues.
Cleveland. They mentioned, like all of that. So I don't think you can have multiple cities suffering in the same way for a while and not have extenuating effects.
So another headline I sent to Julie is weekly mortgage demand from home buyers jump even higher, up to 19% annually.
That's right.
So I'll just punchline this one, Julie.
Yep.
There's 2 bullets. You want to just read them?
Sure. Well, so homebuyer demand and an already strong refi market pushed mortgage application volume up 4.1% week over week, according to Mortgage Bankers Association. Refi application volume was also up 5%, and for the weekend is 122% higher than a year ago. So we have lots of mortgage action right now and lots of demand. That's why you guys are still seeing, you listed, and they will come in most price ranges.
Hey, I just got a text. Somebody's actually asking me if the free coaching program is available still. It is. Please just simply, if you want to get into our free coaching program, it's something we launched as a response to COVID in our attempt to basically help all of you guys through the storm. And we're going to continue doing it. So if you want to become part of the free coaching program, just text the word survival to 31996. Text the word survival to 31996. And when you do, we're going to text you back immediately a link. Just click the link, set up your username and password, and then you get immediate access to the coaching program. Within the coaching program, Real Estate Treasure Map, Think and Grow Rich for Real Estate, all kinds of different books and things that we've written over the years. You guys get all that stuff for free. No strings attached. And this is frankly, our attempt to help as many of you through this rough patch into, the old world into the new world. I mean, we're waiting, and all of us are hopefully we're creating the new normal, right? You guys are creating it for yourselves. We're creating it, all of us together as a civilization, really. Humanity is right now creating whatever the new normal is going to be. But in the intervening months, potentially years, as we sort all that out, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of misdirection. So your move now is to have a very clear path forward, and that's hopefully what we've created for all of you. So do text the word survival to 31996. Text the word survival to 31996. And to Julie's point about that last article about interest rates, if you do have a mortgage, I would strongly encourage all of you to refinance your mortgage. And I'm also going to make a suggestion, and this harkens back to a coaching call I had today. So one of my coaching clients was at a barbecue or something with their neighbors last weekend, and he was telling me that he was hearing a lot of his neighbors essentially, being worried about their financial situation. Mm-hmm. And this is a neighborhood of, say, $500,000 or $600,000 houses. And he was, he heard one of them, which essentially sold restaurant supplies to restaurants, essentially food to restaurants. And that I forget what the others were doing. He just kind of rattled off the litany of normal sort of, I call them middle of the range type jobs. And all of them were basically worried about their business. And then there was a local chiropractor who was worried about his business, because guess who his clients are? All the people who are now worried about whether they're going to keep their jobs. Yep. So if you think about all the sort of, how this actually shakes out in a recession or whatever we're in, recession, depression is just a word, right? But if you think about what we're actually experiencing right now, the unintended consequences, or how far the dominoes will fall, has yet to be determined. But here's how you fit into this conversation. You, in situations like that, learn to tell stories about, you can make the stories up, about clients that you had conversations with that were very similar to the situations that the people are maybe facing right now, and how the clients made a decision to sell the house. And so the types of things, for example, if you have somebody that's maybe they're not too worried about their financial situation, maybe one, they have one great source of income and the other is going to be a little sketch. Well, you definitely want to encourage them to refinance if they haven't already, right? Because these are ridiculously low rates, and lock in long-term, like lock in a 30-year mortgage at 3% or less when inflation starts, which it seems like it's going to, and the inflation rate will more than cover the cost of the borrowed money. So you definitely want to lock in long-term mortgages. Now, if you're dealing with people that are a little bit nervous about their jobs, which is a majority of the people you're going to talk to, they need to realize that the situation or the value in their property is just going to basically, it's going to most likely go down in the next 12 months, or at least not appreciate. And if they have a job now, even if it's not paying the same, the smart move might be for them to, downsize or move to something where they can easily afford the payment, maybe on a substantially less income, versus waiting for their job situation to get worse and then discover that they can't get a mortgage because maybe they're too much underemployed or they're unemployed, and then they can't get a loan, and then they still have to sell the house, and now they're going to be forced to be tenants. So start thinking on behalf of your clients, because a lot of them aren't going to have the sort of emotional courage to think that far into the future, because everyone loves to hope for the best, but nobody prepares for the worst.
No, but you know what everybody does love is being in control, and the script that you just used before everything gets, worse, whether you get furloughed for real, fired, less hours, more uncertainty. And before you have to make a decision, you can make a decision now where you are in control. You can decide to downsize. You can decide to go rent for a while. You can decide to get a super low interest rate. Let's say worst case scenario, you downsize, you get a low interest rate, and things turn up for you. Well, wouldn't that be a great thing to keep as a rental with a locked in super low rate? It gives you options. So I find the scripts that keep people in control are the most effective.
Right.
Because everybody lives in fear of being out of control. And a lot of what we're all dealing with right now is lack of control. We can't control when there's a vaccine coming.
So I asked him how he felt knowing that these were neighbors and people he really loved, not having, basically how he felt when he heard them talking. And he said he felt really sorry for them because he really loves them being neighbors. And, their families are really close. And I said, so how would you feel knowing that they are probably stepping into a minefield without knowing it, and a year from now is when they start self-discovering it as their situation gets worse financially? How will you feel not having had a conversation with them that could have saved them from that minefield? And he said, I'd feel terrible if I'd known that I could have basically had a conversation that would have help them prevent some financial catastrophe. I said, well, then why aren't you doing it? He goes, well, because they're my friends or my neighbors. I don't want them to think, all the things you guys, ego thoughts you guys have as to why you don't actually offer to be of service. I don't want them to think I'm too pushy or desperate or an ambulance chaser, all these things you guys say to yourselves. Okay, so here's the solution. I told him to tell a story about somebody else that he helped. And that's going to be the ultimate antidote to your worry about people, essentially, your ego, basically. So if you tell stories about what people are, about how you help somebody else with a very similar problem, and give them names, right? Bob and Sally, right? They called me the other day and this was the problem they were having. Really make up a story, give it some detail. Maybe you just combine actual experiences. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to help them listen, self-identify with the story you're telling, and then possibly then it opens the door for you to have a conversation with them.
Well, you're removing the embarrassment feelings, the uncomfortable feelings that people naturally have. This is why agents don't like to have these conversations.
Well, you touch on
it. It makes them uncomfortable to have a conversation with somebody who maybe you feel like you kind of are embarrassing or, sharing that with them, but you make it about somebody else, and it's not like that.
The seller, the prospective neighbor who's going to have financial problems, they're the ones that might not want to express their potential financial hardship to you. And if you don't give them permission to, they are going to end up listing the house, but it won't be with you.
That's right.
And they won't list it with you because they'll say, essentially, they thought you were too busy. And the reason they'll say that is because you never actually asked for the business.
Which makes it your fault, not theirs.
Exactly. It's not their fault. Oh, I thought you were best friends with me and we, our kids grew up together. And well, they were embarrassed to express the problems they were having to you. And you were embarrassed to ask if you could help them. See how stupid the whole circle of stupidity is? But ultimately, you're the professional and you're the one that was supposed to offer to be of service to them. And if you don't, not only is it kind of immoral, I mean, if you know someone's going to have a potential problem and you don't help them solve that problem, and you just do it out of your self-preservation, at some extent, that is really kind of a slimy thing to have not helped.
That's right.
Doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean,
and so when you don't get the business, it's your fault. You lost it because you were your ego was telling you, "Oh, this is your ego talking, right?" I don't know. This is how your ego sounds. "Oh, I'm worried that they'll think I'm an ambulance chaser, or I'm being too pushy, or I'm only after my own self-interest." Whereas the reality of it was, if you basically started out by telling them a story that would give them permission to start having a conversation with you, and they would love nothing better than to list the house with you. Nothing better than have you help them solve their problem. You guys get it?
They actually trust you more because you were honest with them and because you legitimately helped them. I always find it's interesting that our own best past clients who repeat and referred were short sale sellers and for sale by owners. Why? Because they knew that it was hard and you clearly solved their problem.
Right.
Versus someone where it was kind of a slam dunk appointment and it kind of sold pretty easily and the transaction was all right, which we both loved, but it's the short sale and the for sale by owners that are super appreciative of the help.
Right before the start of today's podcast, Julie and I got an email from somebody who we sold his house for in New Albany. How many years ago was that? 15?
Yeah. At least, maybe more. Maybe more.
He knows.
It's been a while.
We're friends on Facebook, but we haven't had any direct contact with him for I don't even know how long, really. I mean, maybe he moved to Florida. We moved all over the country. But so he's emailing us today asking us about real estate. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the benefit. In his house in particular, I don't remember specifically the sale of it, but in the market in which he lived, I do remember it never appreciating. So chances are it was a market where there was a lot of negative equity, and we helped him solve a problem. So this is what this market's all about. This is what the mindset's all about. And so when we were talking about the topic, and we started last week, about the things you should never say to yourself, that's what I'm hoping you guys will understand, that all the thoughts that we are sharing with you, that maybe if you're honest with yourselves and you start being introspective with yourself, that you're having within your own head or you're hearing other people say, those are the very thoughts that are going to spoil your potential. But in doing so, why are you allowing those thoughts to manifest? The reason you're allowing those thoughts to manifest is simply because you are trying to protect yourself. And that was the case with this coaching client. That's the case with all of you guys. Your ego is telling you, oh my gosh, they're going to look at you this way or they're going to look at you that way. You guys get it? Do you see how pernicious that is? Do you see how kind of like counterintuitive it is? But look, if you want to be passive, if you want to be passive in the questions you ask and you don't want to be direct, that's fine. Tell stories. And like how I, suggest all of you guys start ending every single conversation you have with everyone. Oh, by the way, who do you know who's thinking about buying or selling that I should be helping? Those are the types of questions that can make it past even the agent who's the most worried about being perceived as a salesperson. And that is your job. And if you don't ask people those questions, if you don't put yourself in a position to help, and I don't care what your sale price is, they're going to make up excuses about you, about why you didn't offer to help. You want to tell the car story? Back in New Albany again?
Oh, about our homeowners insurance guy?
No. Well, okay. So when Julie and I moved to New Albany, there was a family that had been there for a long time. They own a farmer's insurance franchise or whatever they are. Mm-hmm. And we would see them almost every day at Starbucks. And we'd go to Starbucks every day because we sold the house. The manager of Starbucks, Tristan, right? Mm-hmm. We sold her a condo. And she always would say, no matter how long the line was, and typically the line went out the door, she'd always shout out when she saw it. She would, hey, Tim and Julie, how's the real estate market? Which was hilarious because then we would have people in line start having conversations with us about real estate. Great. And she did it every single day. We got so much business from her. It was great. Yeah, it was. Well, so there was a father and a son that owned a local farmer's insurance, whatever it was, right in New Albany. And we would see them every morning. We were cordial to them. They're usually in line at Starbucks at the same time. Never once did they ask us for, now we had people we were referring business to. We'd, sold gazillions of houses at that point, but never once did they ask us. And they sold residential insurance, auto, and we did a ton of reload. We would have been the perfect referral source for them. They never once asked us for business. Never once, not even passively. And I originally thought to myself when we lived there, I don't know, 8, 9 years, 10 years. And I remember every single day for the first I only figured this out like years later, right? When I was trying to help somebody else, an agent, convincing them that they need to start being proactive with their contacts. And this experience, shone a light on exactly how the brain works if you're not proactive with asking people to be of service for them. So here's how my mind worked, and Julie and I, it was fascinating. We had mentally the same experience. Initially, it was, well, the cars must, that was the last name. They must just be too busy, right? They must just not be, they're too busy and, whatever, that's fine. They're too busy. They have so many clients. They're just too busy. And then it went to, they're too busy to, well, maybe they're just, they don't want to do business with us. Maybe somehow we offended them, or our egos were telling us that some reason they were choosing not to ask to do business with us because somehow, there's some sort of, I don't even know what.
Some weirdness of some sort.
And then eventually what we realized was they weren't asking. And this is years later, we realized they weren't asking because they were just being lazy. But that process of, realizing at first, well, they're just too busy. That's the reason they're not asking us to. Oh, they must not like us to. Oh, they're just lazy. That's the exact same mental process that your centers of influence and past clients are having about you, your neighbors, everyone you know, when you don't ask them for business.
Yeah, they think it's actually weird that you don't ask.
They expect you to ask. They want you to ask. Mm-hmm. And why aren't you asking? Because your ego is telling you, oh my gosh, they're going to think of all these strange thoughts about me. It's so opposite of what you think.
They think strange thoughts about you because you don't talk about what you do. I mean, it's funny. We joke with agents that if we were to interview your entire database, let's say that I took your iPhone and I went through your contacts and I were to call and say, what does Tim do for a living? Would they be able to say that it was real estate, or would they be like, gosh, I don't know, I think he's retired, or I don't know. I mean, he's on the golf course all the time. I don't really know.
Yeah, whatever they say.
So until your database can answer that accurately, you're not doing a good enough job at this.
Well, you had a client, speaking of golf course, David Blothard or whatever his name was in Austin.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he actually helped us buy a house in Georgetown. Mm-hmm. And it was so funny. And we were riding around in this really crappy, whatever the hell it was.
Lexus.
And I couldn't even just believe I was having to, it was just gross. And so you can imagine my experience. And we only wanted him just, Julie ended up finding the house and, he helped us buy it. We were living out of state. So most of the stuff we did then was remote. But, it's funny, the first time it was this nasty Lexus, and by the time we got back, he'd upgraded it to a really clean, nice new Mercedes. Mm-hmm. But in any event, he was working primarily with buyers, and he wasn't much of a listing agent. So you can imagine what those conversations in the cars were like for him. I mean, poor guy.
He didn't know what he was being subjected to.
He must have been so happy when we bought.
I know, right?
Yeah, well, in any event, so...
But he actually said, I don't want to feel like an ambulance chaser.
That's what he said. And so Julie then... ends up personally coaching him, big surprise. And then she starts through a series of questions. He was, a lot of you guys have this stance. I will not pick up the phone ever. You guys can just go to, whatever's worse than hell. If you're going to try to get me to do anything,
not gonna do
I'm never going to pick up the phone. I don't, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. We get it. We hear you.
Got it.
You're not going to prospect. That's the reason we call it proactive lead generation, by the way, because word prospect makes so many of you
have to camouflage it.
Exactly. We have to make it politically correct. Mm-hmm. It's not prospecting. It's proactive lead generation. So Julie, after he expressed in no uncertain terms that he would never do any proactive lead generation, but what he did do, listeners, is he loved to play golf.
That's right. I mean, so when somebody gives you the long list of things that they won't do, as a coach, you are forced to ask them, well, what will you do? Where has your business actually come from? Because he's a pretty successful guy. Where has your business been coming from? Well, I golf all the time, but they're mostly, referrals and friends and stuff like that. And we talked about the fact that that's mostly luck and hopium, but that his business was coming from there. And so we talked about if it's coming from golf, let's golf more. Let's do more clubs. Let's upgrade your golf membership to a luxury golf club. Let's do more competition, etc. But the punchline is this: he did not
get. You made rules.
Well, that's right, but here's the thing: he did not get clear on the fact that you have to talk about the fact that you're in real estate and ask for the business until he was eating lunch after a tournament with his friends, and one friend turns to the next and says, "Oh, by the way, I'm meeting with somebody to sell my house tonight because me and my wife just finished our new construction home." To which Dave was like, "What? Can you imagine what?" You remember I'm in real estate too, right?
It was like $2.5 million too, wasn't it?
It was something. I mean, it was something you would want to list, right? And he's like, "Well, don't you remember I'm in real estate too?" And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, you are, aren't you?" And he barely ended up taking that listing. So the point was, had they not had that lunch, he never would have even had that opportunity. And at that point, he was convinced that it's now okay to actually talk about real estate. and to actually ask for the business. See, he was doing all the action, making the contacts and building a center of influence.
He was playing golf.
He wasn't actually using any scripts. He wasn't actually asking for the business. And if I were to interview his center of influence, all of his golf buddies, how many of them would have just said he's retired?
So this is the rule Julie made. He loved to play golf. He belonged to 3 different golf courses. And so this is what Julie said. Fine, you play golf, but here are your rules. You cannot play with your same group of buddies every time. You have to have new sets of buddies every time you play golf. And you have to promise, swear in a stack of Bibles, Qurans, or whatnot, Torahs, that you will ask always, by the way, who do you know, Buff and Todd, or whatever their golf course buddies' names are?
Right.
Who do you know who's thinking about buying or selling that I should be helping? In other words, he cannot play with the same guys. In other words, he has to be forced to expand his center of influence and past client list.
That's right.
And he always has to ask for business when he's playing. So yes, he can play golf, which obviously he was thrilled about.
He was pretty good at it too.
Yeah. Yes, you can play golf. And we'll even write a doctor's note to your wife explaining, this is literally, Julie, I think, wrote a note to his wife saying this is real work. You don't have to chastise him for playing golf. But here are the rules, right? And then guess what? His business took off. I mean, he became one of the most successful agents in his brokerage.
And more listings than buyers.
Right.
And I lost my train of thought for a second.
There it was, more listings than buyers.
More listings. Well, that's the bottom. Oh, I know what it was. Because the definition of a contact is a conversation with a decision-making adult, but don't forget the last part, about real estate.
Yep.
You have to actually talk about real estate. It's not enough to just say, hey, how's it going? So on that note, our last point in our series about what you're not allowed to say to yourself, we actually covered at the top of this podcast, which was, don't say to yourself, I can't go up market or luxury because these people are different than me. We talked about the fact that, they're wanting the same things.
Yep, I think we beat that into the ground. So the existence that you have right now, where you're living, look around, the car you're driving, if you're listening to us in your car, if you're walking, if you're, we have, sometimes you guys send us pictures where you're listening to our podcast. We actually love that. Text us a picture, 512-758-0206, and provide you're not sitting on the John right now, do send us a picture of where you're listening to the podcast. We've gotten pictures of people that's Tesla screens. We've gotten pictures of people, running. We've gotten pictures of people having glasses of wine. Send pictures of how you listen to us and where you listen to us and when you listen to us. Tens of thousands of you do every single day. But the big takeaway from all of you is that your environment, where you're living now, the glass of wine you're sharing hopefully with the person you love right now, if that's where you're running, the shoes that you're wearing on your feet, whatever, all of that is a direct representation of the thoughts that you had last year, 10 minutes ago, 10 years ago. You're living right now in the shadows, in the wake of the thoughts that you had and the actions that you took in the past. So Julie and I, we have this little funny thing that we say between us, and I know a lot of our coaching clients do it too, where we say, thanks, past Tim and Julie. You got to uncover your mic. Thanks, past Tim and Julie. Or, and that's us acknowledging the fact that what we're enjoying today, right now, is a result of what we did in the past. And some of you guys need to acknowledge the fact that if you're not liking your present, it's because you weren't doing what you didn't want to do when you didn't want to do it in the past. So you got to be asking yourself and be really honest. Are you what is your future going to be like based on the activities and the things you're thinking now? Are you sharing, or certainly out loud or within your own head, any of the thoughts that we've been asking you guys not to have anymore? Stop essentially saying some of these normal, I can't afford that, all these types of things we've been talking about since last Tuesday. Go back and listen to all those past podcasts and really be honest with yourself if you're saying any of those things to yourself. Because if you are, you got to then realize that what you're going to be experiencing, 10 minutes from now, 10 years from now, 6 months from now, is a direct representation of what you do today. So will the future you be saying thank you to the past you, or will the future you be hating on the past you, and the future you saying, damn it, why are you so lazy? You should have actually asked for that business, and now you would have had that listing and you would have had that commission check. So this is how you have to think, because this is the reality of it. So yes, in some ways, your biggest competitor is yourself. If you want to be specific about that, your biggest competitor is your natural desire to be lazy. Really, at the end of the day, that's what it is. lazy's the word. Don't try to sugarcoat it with mindset words or lacking your big why or not having motivation or feeling passion. It's just you being lazy. That's it. Lazy is a lifestyle, and maybe the present you is now realizing that the past you has mastered the lazy lifestyle, and you're hoping for something different and something better for yourself. The first thing you guys should all consider doing is joining the free coaching program. Just be clear, it's a shadow of what our normal coaching program is, but it does give you an opportunity to go at least in the right direction. Text the word survival to 31996. Text the word survival to 31996. And thanks to all of you who are asking me about eXp Realty. If you'd like to talk with me about joining Julie and I's eXp Realty group, I would love to have that opportunity to explain to you why we aligned with eXp and why you probably are going to want to do the same thing. So just text me directly at 512-758-0206. If you want to talk to me directly about eXp, just text me directly at 512-758-0206. Anything else you'd like to say, guys?
Speaking of thank you past filling in your name, some of the most gratitude that I've heard in recent calls that you've done is people who joined eXp like a year ago, and they're going, holy tamale, look at my stock.
Yeah.
They didn't even look at it.
Did you see where the stock is
I
today?
heard from one of our clients
$20.
It was very high. Yes. Yeah. I know. And they're like, God, that was a good decision.
I know. That's true. Some of the people, well, I'm thinking of Colette, actually.
Yeah.
She texted me yesterday, and she's been in eXp for a year, and it's a lot. I mean, the amount of money that she's been in stock awards that she's gotten so far is shocking. If you guys aren't taking a hard look at eXp,
and that's pretty passive too.
Right, exactly.
It's like she forgets to look at it, and then it's like, oh my goodness.
Not to mention revenue share. I mean, somebody else, Rochelle, right? And I was having a conversation with her recently too. And she is going to probably accomplish the goal of having enough money coming in from revenue share that all of her personal bills are covered, and she's probably going to accomplish that within the next 6 months or less.
That's
and
awesome.
She's only been in eXp for 18 months.
That's incredible.
So within 2 years, she's basically has the potential to be financially free, and that is the definition of rich. Rich is where your money works for you, and you no longer have to work for your money. But she's 53. She's struggled on and off in varying degrees her whole life, as most people do. And she's had some real hardship. There's no doubt about it. Just you name it, she's experienced it. And for her to have made the simple decision of switching over to eXp Realty, now seeing the opportunity that's going to create for her to actually finally have some financial freedom in her life, I think that's just an amazing gift that eXp Realty is to the industry.
And I'm so proud of her and so many of our other associates that have done that. What a gift to yourself that is.
It is. And you know what? Right now, if someone asks me right now, Tim, what's the most important? I just got my real estate license. I've had my real estate license forever. What's the number one thing I should be doing right now? Honestly, it's preparing yourself. It's what we've been preaching to all of you guys for the next, coming years. But really what I tell you to do is absolutely join eXp Realty, because the positioning of that company nationwide, really globally, is like nothing we've ever seen before. But purely from a financial perspective, it's the smartest thing all of you guys can do, because it does create potential additional income streams for you that I've never seen available to, normal agents like all of us really at our core are. So do consider texting me at 512-758-0206. 512-758-0206. In the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day. Remember, you can listen to past podcasts at any time on Stitcher, iTunes, Spotify, over on our main website, timandjulieharris.com. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows. And until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.